welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you will consider subscribing to my channel. Now, in this video, we will work in MySQL and we'll start creating a database and loading data into that database. But before we can get started, you need to install MySQL if you haven't done that already. So I'm going to leave this link in the description, and it's just a guide how to install MySQL. Now, if you've never worked with SQL before, I do recommend going through this tutorial. It's actually quite good. And there's a basic tutorial, there's an intermediate tutorial, and there's an advanced tutorial. Now, it's not super advanced, the advanced part either, but it's fairly quick to go through, and it's very easy to follow along, I think. So I do recommend this. Check the link below the video. Okay, so now that you've installed MySQL, we'll just go ahead and open it up. So MySQL Workbench, we'll use that one. And you should have a screen looking something like this. Now, I've changed the name of my server to HockeyScuddy, so on your computer it should say MySQL 80 or something like that. But we'll just open it, and you need to put in your password. And once you open it, it's just a blank query, and you can see in my server here I have 3 databases already, and AHL, NHL, and PWHL. Now for this one we want to create a new database. So there are a few ways you can do that, but you could just right click somewhere over here and say create new schema, and let's call it YouTube. Now MySQL Workbench doesn't understand uppercase and lowercase, so it's gonna say that it's going to make it into just lower cases. Doesn't matter, we'll just hit OK and say create schema, so you could just do that yourself. And that's it. You can see now there's a new database over here. There's nothing in it, there's no tables here, but we've created the database now. Then you want to, what should I say? You want to highlight, you want to pick this database, so you need to double click. Otherwise, it won't understand that it's this database that you're working with. You could also say use YouTube. It will do the same thing. Every time you do a SQL script, you have to end it with a semicolon. So now if we pick AHL and then hit this lightning over here, runs the script that is currently highlighted. This one runs every script, or if you select something, then it runs that particular part of the script. But you can just hit this one and you can say now we've selected YouTube. Doesn't matter, we'll just delete this one. Now we do need to load data into our database, but we don't really have any data just yet. So we'll just go to the Excel workbook that we created in video number 3. So this is the workbook that can load data for a full season at a time. So let's just try and pick the newest season. So let's go 2023, 2024, hit enter, and then we go to, let's just open up the databases here. So yeah, so you can see all the things that we built in the previous video, and we just want to load everything from this season. So we'll just say refresh all, and this is gonna take around 10 minutes to get all the data. It's fairly big database, big data size that we're collecting, so it will take a little while. So we'll just let it run and then I'll be back. Alright, so now the data for the 23-24 season has been loaded. And I will put a link to this Excel workbook in the description so you can load it yourself if you want to. Now there is the players table hasn't been loaded. There's only a connection here, so we just need to load that one. So let's just add it to the data model and hit OK. It shouldn't take very long. And that's it. Okay, so now we need to load this data, load these tables into CSV files so that we can load them to our SQL database. So in order to do that, I'm using an add-in called DAX Studio. So you'll need to go and install that one. It's just daxstudio.org. Click the install. There's nothing to it really. Just make sure to tick the Excel add-in box. But I think it should be ticked by default, so I don't think you have to do anything really. But do install this one. Then you can use it to load, to create CSV files. So we'll just open DAX Studio. It's important that you open the DAX Studio from the Excel workbook in order for it to connect to the data model. So we'll just open it. And you can see it connects to the workbook. We'll just see here, and you can see all the tables. Now, all we have to do is go to Advanced, Export Data, Export CSV files, and we don't want to quote all text strings. So we'll just untick this one. And then we can put it, I've created a YouTube folder, so let's just put it there. And that's it. Now we don't really want all of these things. We don't want the URLs and we don't want the select season table. But other than that, we'll just load these, create these five CSV files. So let's just hit export, and it takes just a little while. So that was it. Now we've exported our data into CSV files. So let's just close down DAX Studio again, and we can open up the folder. I already have it opened here. So you can see the 5 CSV files here. We can try and open one of them. This is the small one. And it's just, it holds all the data that we need. Perfect. So now we can load it to our SQL server. So let's just go back into MySQL. And there are a few ways we can do this. Now, there is a table import wizard here that we can use. The problem is this is super slow in terms of loading data. So it's not really useful when we want to load the play-by-play data or the shift data, because that would take hours upon hours to load that. But let's just try and use it for the Teams CSV file. So let's just, so it's already open, so it's this one. We'll just hit open, next, create new table, Teams, yes. And it here it shows the format of each column, and it shows the column name, and it looks correct. So let's just hit next and load the data. And you can see it didn't take long when it was just I think it's 6159 records. So now we can update it and see there is actually a table here called Teams, and to select that table we can use the script called select star. This means everything from Teams, and that's it. All scripts you make has to end with a semicolon. So we'll just run this script, and you can see it's loaded. Now there are some problems with the naming, but we'll look into that in the next video. All right, so we have our teams table here. So let's try and do the same. So if we load the data from the play-by-play, for instance, we can't use the import wizard because it will take way too long. So what we have to do is we have to load it using a script, but we can use the import wizard just to create the table. I think that's the easiest way to do it. So let's just try and select, let's pick the play-by-play data and hit create new table, next, and there's a lot of columns here. Let's just hit next. But then instead of waiting for it to import it, that would take hours. We're just going to say cancel, and that's fine. We cancel it on purpose, but it has created the table now. It's just not all the data is not there. Not nearly all the data is there. So we can just try and say play-by-play just to see what's in here. And we can see it's getting the data, but there's only a few rows here, not nearly enough. But we just wanted to create the table with the columns and the column type. So what we actually want to do now is we want to truncate the table. So you can do that either by right-clicking here and say truncate table, or you can just write it out, truncate play-by-play, and run the script. And now if we select everything, it should just be an empty table. So this is what we want. So now we have an empty table that we can load data into. Okay, so how do we do that in MySQL? Well, we just write a quite simple script. It says load data in file, and then we need the path of the file that we want to load data from. So we can go here and we can go just copy as a path. And then we'll just paste that here, and then let's put it in single quotes. That's usually what you use in MySQL. And then we also need to define how it should load the file, load the data. So it has to field terminate by comma. It has to be terminated by comma. This just means that it's a CSV file, so every time it comes across a comma, then it terminates and adds a new column, just like that. And then we also have to, actually we have to do that first. So we have to say into table YouTube, because that's our database. So it's YouTube play-by-play. So now it loads this data into YouTube, into our play-by-play data, play-by-play table that we just created, and the field is terminated by a comma, and we also want to ignore one lines. And apparently this isn't correct. So it has to be fields terminated by comma. And we want to ignore the first row because the first row is the headers, but we already have headers in our table. So let's try and run this. And there's an error because in SQL they don't understand those tilted lines when they go that way. So either you have to create double lines or you have to turn it the other way. That's just a syntax thing. So we just need to turn them the other way. And now it should work. It should load all the data. This will take just a few seconds. And there's an error here. So there's an error because it has the column situation code as an integer column, but if it's an integer column, then you can't have blank values, and there are blank values in this file. So we need to change the format of the table. So we'll just go to alter table. I already checked this out, and there are a few. It's only in the playoff games. I don't know why, but there are a few events where it's just the game end event. So it's the very last event of the game where the situation code is blank. But we'll just, for now, we'll just change the format into a text, then it will work. And it doesn't really matter if it's text or if it's a integer. MySQL or SQL in general is not as restrictive based on the column type as it is in Power Query or in Excel. So you can still do calculations based on situation code, even if it's listed, even if the column is of the format text. But let's just apply this and see if it works. So let's just shut this down and try and load the data. So I think it should work now. And you can see here it took 8.4 seconds to load almost 500,000 rows into the database. So this is a very quick way to do it compared to using the wizard. So now we have actually a table with all the play-by-play data. We can load it just like this. And it will take a little while because it's loading all of the rows. We could load less than all of the rows. We could select only the top 1000 rows, for instance. Let's just try and sort by situation code, and you can see there are blank values here. And you can see it's all the game end, and it's all in the playoff games. Actually, it's not all in the playoff games. Doesn't matter. It is only game end events, and it's only a few of them. I don't know why there's no situation code here, but we'll just leave it in as a text for now. Now, all of what I've done so far, you cannot do without the correct settings. So let me just I forgot to do this beforehand, but let's just take it now. So you cannot load data from anywhere on the computer. You cannot. The default setting when you install MySQL is that there is one specific folder where you can load data from and where you can write data to. So in order to load data from a random folder on the computer, you need to have the settings set up correctly. So I'll just let's try and say show variables like secure prep. Okay, so I figured it out. You have to put in show variables like secure file priv. So if you try and do this, you will see a path here in the value. And this means this is the only folder that you can write to and load from. So you can see here in my computer it's just blank because I set it to be blank, meaning I can write to anywhere and I can load data from anywhere on the computer. So if you want to change this, you have to do that. So I'll just show you how you can change this if you want to. So you have to go to the MySQL folder. So we'll just go to the C folder and then you have to hit the program data. And this folder right here is hidden. So you have to go to show and you have to say show hidden elements. Otherwise you can't see it. So you just go here, go to MySQL, go to MySQL server. And then there's this text file here. This text file holds information about all the configuration settings. So in here we can change the what was it called? The secure file privileges. We can change that in this file here. So we're just gonna open it. And then I don't know where it is, but we can just search, just go find, search for secure. And then you can see here that I already changed it. So what you will see is likely you'll see this right here. And this is the default setting. So this is the folder where you can save and load data from. Now I just put a hash mark in before so just to ignore it. And then I made a new line where it says secure file priv equals and just a blank string. This means that you can load and write to any place on the computer. So you could just in your situation you could just delete this, doesn't really matter. So that's it. The problem is you cannot save this file. So if you say save, and if we just try and save it here, and you'll say should it replace it, then you cannot do it because you don't have the privileges to overwrite that file. So what you have to do is you have to save it somewhere else. So we could save it, we could just save it in our YouTube folder as a text file, and shut it down, go to our YouTube folder, and now we can just copy it and then go to the MySQL server and replace it here. And then you can say replace the file on the destination and it will work. You do need administrator privileges in order to do this, but now it does work. We've changed it. So from here, things should work, but we do need to restart the server, the MySQL server. So in order to do that, we need to go to services. You can go to the Windows, click on the Windows icon, and you can search for service, which is called tjenester in Danish. So you need to run that as an administrator. And then you can go down and you can go down to MySQL 80. I think you would find the server name being, but there is no server name named that on my computer because I renamed the server to Hockeyskøtte. So it's right here. So this is the one, and then you just need to restart the service. Now, before we do that, I do want to right click, hit settings, and go to log on. because I also changed the log on to be a local system account. So this allows me to write to anywhere on the computer. If this is not set to local system account, then even though you have a blank secure file priv, you're still not allowed to write to anywhere on the computer because this setting here overrides that privilege. But if you set it to local system account, and if you're just working on your own computer, there's no problem here. So we'll just take this one, then everything should work. And then you just need to restart the service, and it will take just a few seconds. That's it. And then we go to MySQL, and now you can try and rerun this code, and it should have changed the path to nothing. So if we try and rerun, we'll have to log in again because it just restarted the server. So we'll just do that. And now when you run it, it should show nothing here in the value. It should show a blank value. Okay, so far so good. So now we've loaded data from our play-by-play CSV file into our play-by-play table in the database. So we just need to do the same for the other CSV files. So again, I do prefer loading the table using the input wizard just to get the table, and then we can load data into the table afterwards. So let's do that again. Let's take the players table, create new table, and the birthday here is set to be a text value and not a date value. The problem is that the date format in Power Query and the date format in MySQL is not the same. So we'll just load it as a text format for now. You can see there's a time as well. But let's just load it as a text. Then we can always change the format afterwards if we want to. So let's just load it like this and say import, data import. Let's just import it. Yes, yes. And now we can view it. It was the wrong table, so we can view the players table, sorry. And see what happens. So you can see there's only 3 rows here. And if we update here, there's now a players table. So let's just truncate this so there's no rows here. So let's truncate the players table. So now it's just a blank table with all the column names and the column types. And now we can load the data from our players CSV file in this path. And we need to load it into our players table. And let's run this. And you can see there's 1272 rows. And if we select this, there is actually a mistake in this data because there are a few duplicate values, and I have no idea why there are duplicate values. Let's just see, there are 2 Aaron Eggblats, for instance. I think maybe the call we make to the API gets the player 2 times if he played both in the playoffs and in the regular season. But I'm not 100% sure about this. But there are duplicate values and they are looking exactly the same. And this is not an error in MySQL, it's an error in Power Query where we need to remove duplicates. But we can remove the duplicates directly here in MySQL. One way to do that is to just is to use the group by function. So yeah, let's just show it how you can do it. So let's just pick it up and say group by, and then we have to group by all of the columns, and unfortunately you can't just say all of them. You have to specify the column name, so you have to say season, comma, birth date, draft overall. Now, upper and lower case is not important. So that's it. And now if we run it, we should see that the number of rows should decrease because now, and there was a mistake because I need to say shoots catches. So now there's only 1023 rows in here because it removed all duplicate values. So if we say now there's only our neckblack once. Okay, so this select script right here gets the data, but it doesn't change the players table. So we haven't really updated anything. We just selected this from the player table. So we need to update the table, and that's not super obvious to do. So what should I say? So we have to create a new table with the updated data. So we'll just say create table. We'll just call it players 2. So now if we update here, we have a new table called players 2, and this has removed all the duplicate values. So now we can say select everything from players 2. Just to illustrate that now we have the correct table in here. So we have duplicate, we have 2 tables with almost the same data, so you'd probably want to drop one of them at some point. But for now, we'll just leave it just to show that you can create a new table and that you can remove duplicates by doing a group by. Okay, so far so good. Now we've loaded the play-by-play, we loaded the players, we loaded the teams. So let's load the last 2 tables. And again, let's just use the import. And let's take the schedule, create new table. Again, the game date is just put in as a text. Loaded and abort. And then we'll truncate the schedule. Let's just try and load it, select it. And this is just a blank table with all the column names. So now we can load data into it. Say schedule. And the table name is now schedule. And it works, 1400 rows. So let's try and load it. And you can see here it works. Now, Again, if we were to get the schedule from a what should I say, from the next season, for instance, then there would be no away score or home score, and this means that the away score and home score cannot be integers because integers can be blank values. So just something to be aware of. It works, there's no problem here. But whenever you have blank value, you can't load data into it and have an integer format of the column. So you can either load it as text, or you can change the values from blanks to zeros, for instance, or something like that. But okay, let's just load the last file into our database. Let's do it the exact same way. Let's take the shift. This is the largest one with more than 1 million rows. And let's say next, next, abort. Just say close. Now we need to truncate the what's it called, shifts or shift, I don't know. Let's just try and see. It's called shift. So let's truncate it and let's try and load the data just to see if everything works. It does. And now we can load the data into the empty table. And the table name is shift. So let's see. Yes, so there's an error here. Again, it has to do with the integer value. And I already knew this, but I just wanted to show it. So there are a few rows in this data where you have completely blank rows with no value at all. And this is an error in the NHL API, which is where they just put in random blank rows sometimes. So what do we do? So let's start off by loading it not with integer values, but with text values. And I already know that these are blanks, but let's just, so we need to change the text format also to these columns. Now the game ID comes from the schedule table, so that's actually not a problem. We can leave that as it is. Just say apply, finish. So let's try and load it now. So now it's just loading everything as text, and it should work. And you can see it loaded 1,060,000 rows. So let's try and look at it. This will take just a little while to fetch because there's a lot of rows here. Yeah, it took 1.5 seconds, so not too bad. So let's just try and sort it by period. And then you can see there are these blank rows that are just completely blank. So we just want to remove these. There's no data there. So how do we do that? Well, we can use the where function to select these specific rows, and then we can delete them. So what we want to do is we want to say select everything from shift where let's say period is equal to blank. So let's see if this works. And you can see now we only have selected the blank rows. Well, we don't actually want to select them, we want to delete them. So how do we do that? We just change this to delete, and then we should see that 13 rows are affected. So let's try and do that. 13 rows affected. Perfect, it worked. It deleted all the blank rows. So let's just try and say select everything from shift. We can just remove this one. Actually, we can leave it. So now it should be, there should be nothing here because we deleted those. And if we run it now, we will see that it gets all the data except for those 13 rows that were blank. So you can see here the number is 60,176. Up here when we loaded the data it was 60,189. So we removed those 13 blank rows. So this also means that now we could actually change the format back to integers if we wanted to do that, because now there are no blank rows. So sometimes you just need to load data as text and then convert it, remove the errors or whatever you want to do, and then you can convert it back into an integer. It's not more difficult than that. So now we have our 5 tables in our database. And we can start working on these. And I don't think I want to show any more in this video. So now there was a few mistakes along the way. There's a few errors, but that's how it goes sometimes. And you need to learn how to work around this. So what we learned was we've installed MySQL. We changed the secure privileges so that you can load data from anywhere and you can write data to anywhere. We also changed the log on settings, which is needed in order to be able to write to any folder you want. And then we loaded data into our database. We created a new database, we loaded data into it. And it's not, this is probably the most difficult part. This took me a little while to learn how to do that. But once you have this, you can start manipulating data, you can start transforming data, you can start cleaning data. And that part is actually easier, I think. But we'll just end the video here, and I hope you learned something, and then in the next video we'll do some actual data cleaning, actual data transformations. So goodbye.